All right, today I am going to give my review of Baptism of Fire, The Last Vikings, The Silk Road, generally that whole line of stuff, but mostly focusing on Baptism of Fire by Mad Mage's Musing, I believe, and the RPG Pundit. Uh, yeah. So, anyway, rules wise, it's very similar to basically any kind of OSR that you might run into. There are some differences though. The classes are different and they tend to be more based around the cultural norms of the game than just generic. I mean, fighter is fighter, sure, but Holy Warrior is not Paladin. Priest is not what you think. And that is because these games are set in about the 10th or 11th century in Eastern Europe. So that's going to be a big selling point right there. If you are a Slavaboo, you're Slavic, or wish you were, then you're probably, if you're a gamer, you're going to be like, okay, cool. A D&D game and setting, basically, a role-playing OSR game and setting, I should say, that focuses on mythology and the various interactions between demons, gods, vampire, etc., and the church, the early church. And of course, this is right about the time when the church is starting to really split. So you would have in some parts in the east, say you went to Kiev, you would have the Eastern Orthodox Church because Kiev, under the rule of the House of Rourke, was Orthodox and allied with the Eastern Roman Empire. Meanwhile, the further west you go in Poland and stuff like that, the more Romanesque the church is, the more Western Rome. So there is that. Some people might be like, I don't want to play a game that has real world religions in it. And this might be a weakness, but I think it's the strength of the game because anyone can make a fighter and say, I am a fighter from Hamlet and I serve St. Cuthbert and I'm going to spend, the next 6 months wrecking goblins and doing whatever. And that's a lot of fun. We've all been there, right? We've done that, and that's a lot of fun. But see, the thing that sets Baptism of Fire apart is there is, if your DM allows it to be, and really he should or she should. I hate to have to say that, but because heaven forbid somebody be offended that I didn't say she. Your DM really, if they want the game to be memorable, should be pushing on the fact that there's a lot of politics also involved. There's the difference between the classes, whether it's freedmen, thralls, lesser nobles, medium nobles, not quite so medium nobles, etc. I mean, it can go all the way through the scale, right? And if you've got a player character group that's really willing to run with and embrace a lot of the different cultural aspects of the game, you will find that it is very, very interesting and exciting. I mean, anybody can play a fighter, but what if you play a fighter except your fighter is from a certain house that's a noble family and they are not necessarily friends with another house with a noble family, and etc. etc. You see what I mean? So the main thing I think that really, other than the fact that Eastern European monsters are way cooler than Western European monsters, Western European monsters have become just boring to me. It's like, oh, look, orcs, yay. Or, oh, I'm so terrified by, the whatever, right? No, no. You want to terrify your opponent's sick, vampiric fetuses at them, right? Or have them get attacked by a noon ghost, or maybe have to resist being charmed into the water by Rusalka and drowned. That's one thing about all Slavic role playing, or just Slavic anything. Stay away from the water, because whatever's in it wants you dead. And you can take that advice from me, right? So, yeah, I'm not going to get into the rules so much, because they're basically just the OSR rules you already know. Maybe the only difference being that when you level, what you get when you level, you can randomize and that, or pick. But if you randomize, you get more, right? And that does change the game around a little bit, because you might not 100% know what your character is going to improve in.
I'm going to be right back. I'm running to Aldi. We need ketchup and stuff. We may be having hamburgers again, and I need ketchup.
Okay. So, since you don't know what your character might necessarily improve in, because my goal or plot is to always take the two rolls, the two random rolls, instead of the pick one power, because I mean, you've got a pretty good chance of getting what you want anyway, and then a bonus thing. So that is a difference. When you level up, instead of just automatically getting some hit points or whatever, you roll on a chart, and it's different for each class. And depending on what you roll, that's actually what you got. Because now, I don't know why the pundit did it this way. Pundit does weird shit. He wears ascots and smokes pipes and puts yogurt in coffee. So I don't know what in the hell he's thinking. But from my point of view, I think it definitely represents the fact that this is not your character training to learn a skill. This is your character and what they learned over the course of the game, which may not indeed be the skill you would necessarily have picked, but it may in fact be the skill that you actually, needed. So, yes, leveling, I like. If you need hit points, just say screw it and pick the extra hit die. But if you want to take your chance and make the roll, take your chance and make the roll. Me, I'm taking my chance every time, because I believe it makes a better, more interesting character over time if you survive. And I say if you survive because, bear in mind, again, this is a Slavic game, or set in Eastern Europe, and pretty much everything is deadly. Everything can curse you. Everything wants to suck your blood out. Vampires and strigoi and all the other things are all there. And then on top of that, pagans. Like, the entire Baltic coast is pretty much dominated with pagans. So if you're playing a Christian, well, the pagans, a lot of them are not friendly and will resort to such things as, boiling you alive and stuff, right? And that kind of goes the same way. If you choose to play like a Viking pagan, but journeying about and adventuring in Poland, then if you make your paganism too much of the centerpiece of your character, say you're always getting into it with priests and talking about how, you don't respect their dead god that got nailed to a tree, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's a good chance you're going to end up getting thrown on a pyre, or some other incredibly horrible event will happen. And you will deserve it, because you're obviously an idiot and you didn't read the room, right? If you're in a Christian dominated region, but you still believe in Chernabog and Belobog and all that, or the Viking gods for some reason, you might want to learn to keep your yap shut, as not keeping your yap shut could be 100% a one-way ticket to Deadville. Population U. So, I mean, this is actually part of the game that I actually really like. The fact that the game itself runs wonderfully. It runs wonderfully. I mean, it runs wonderfully, as you would expect OSR games to run, and pretty much any game made by the pundit. I mean, regardless of what some people's personal opinions are of the guy, you can't take away the fact that he does make good games. And I'm really happy with his joining forces with Mad Mage to get some stuff out there. I'm also happy that if you get the Last Vikings book, I may have mentioned this, you can play a Kievan Rus, a Viking from the Kievan Rus lands that would be Christian. And actually, you might get along a lot better, especially if the DM sets the campaign in Eastern Poland, like the Redlands or something like that. You might have a much more enjoyable time. So let me get my thoughts together. Here is why Baptism of Fire is so great. It isn't just a dungeon crawl. It's an actual game where your character can be immersed fully if the referee actually, reads up on some stuff, into entirely different cultures and the conflicts between those cultures. But not only that, within the culture that you are a part of, there are conflicts between, the nobility versus the freemen versus etc., right? Guilds and stuff. The church is very powerful. So this is a game where, again, it's not like you meet at the tavern and you're going to go find a dungeon to raid to try and get some loot. This is more of a, you meet at a dungeon, you hear a legend that there's a monster stalking the bogs outside of the town of Lubavik, and that the villagers of that town are so terrified of these beasts that they're willing to pay a fat stack of denarii, which is Roman, because in this time period, when possible, they still used Roman coins. So maybe your characters deciding to be heroes journey to the village, and then you get into a whole negotiation with the village leader, which may go one way or another depending. I mean, if you roll into the town and you've got, a hammer of Thor hanging off your neck and you're like, you sissy Christians needing help, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they might just murder you, or they might put up with your shit just because they want to get the Lecco or whatever it is tormenting them gone. Yeah, that's the thing, every adventure matters. It's not just a let's go crush orcs, which don't get me wrong. I love crushing orcs. That's one of my favorite things. Orcs are evil. Screw them. Crush them into the ground every time, all the time. But sometimes, most times, it might be a bit more enjoyable to actually have a reason you're going somewhere. Like, this town is haunted by a monster, and the monster keeps coming in the middle of the night and draining all the blood out of the farm stock. And sometimes it gets so angry that it summons up great winds that knock over barns and stuff, right? And your characters are like, WTF here? What's going on, right? You might have to do a little research, which means if you have a priest or, someone like that in the party, that could really help you out, right? And you might find out that you're dealing with a pernich. I use the Russian pronunciation, but it is the spirit of a child that was born without proper religious ritual. So maybe a woman got pregnant and had a miscarriage, and instead of having the child buried properly with a priest, they just left the child out in the woods. Well, guess what? In Slavic myth, that child can come back as a vengeful spirit, 100% out to completely wreck the people who were her family, its family, whatever, right? And now the players will have to figure out all of these things. So there's some investigation. I guess what I'm really trying to say, if we're going to try and I'm going to try to finish this up because it's starting to drag on. Baptism of Fire is better than most role-playing games simply because it is the most role-playing game. Any game can tell you to roll X number generator to find out if X thing happens. Any game can do this. This is something that has been getting done since Risk, Monopoly. Doesn't matter. Any game can do this. But what makes Baptism of Fire so special is that it's more about how your character interacts with the world and immerses themselves in the world, and how the world interacts with you, I should say, than necessarily a particular die roll. It is a OSR game that is built around role play instead of, let's mug orcs. Now, again, I want to go on the record and say I'm not totally against mugging orcs. I love mugging orcs. I love Osric. I am a huge fan and think that AD&D is one of the greatest games ever, and everyone should read the AD&D First Edition DM book. I also, even though I'm playing with Baptism of Fire, I still use my Wilderness and Dungeoneer survival guides because I find them completely necessary at the table, just indispensable, right? So it's not like I'm sitting here trying to say I hate all things D&D. What I'm trying to tell you is this is a game, if you're looking for deep role play, you want your character's actions to really matter, and you want things happening in the world to matter, like maybe you become the count of some area, maybe you do some job for the king, and now you're being granted all this stuff, or maybe you screw the king over somehow and he hates your guts and you're on the run because you're now persona non grata until you can figure out a way to win his favor back, right? And remember, you can always just travel east to Kiev, accept orthodoxy and adventure there. But hey, I'm biased. So that is what it is. And RPG opponents research into these games, and I know I'm mostly talking about Baptism of Fire, but I mean all of them in the series is just amazing. Say what you want about the guy. I know he is a very, a lot of people have opinions, and I'm not going to argue with people about it because I don't care what people think about the guy. I know what I think about the guy. And what I think about the guy is the ascot is lame as shit. The smoking the pipe is really, really kind of like, really, dude. But his research when it comes to medieval things, amazing. So give the guy the credit he deserves, right? So yeah, if you are ever like, I want to play a game that's different than other D&D games, and I'll play in a medieval Poland, but in this medieval Poland, magic actually exists. Priests perform miracles, and all the monsters you ever heard about living in the woods, you know, the leshies and all of that stuff, they're real, and they will kill you. Some of them. So if you want to play that kind of game, you can. My advice for you, first off, is do everything random when you're creating your character. Like roll up your family, your wealth, all your stuff random. Don't worry about weapons. Every character, depending on its class, will start with armor, weapons, etc. And really get into the culture. That's my advice for players. My advice for DMs is this. Yes, we all know history happened and what happened, right? But you can change it. And it's okay. You know, if somehow through hook or crook or whatever, one of the players happens to be a noble and happens to do some crazy shit and then happens to be promoted to a rank that maybe historically they never would have had, but hey, now they do, go with it. Don't hold your characters back. Reality doesn't matter. Look, monsters, dragons, strigoi, all that stuff, you know, if you can play a game where all those things exist, then you can go ahead and afford to ignore history a little bit and just really embrace the parts of the game you want to. Whether that's maybe the church and the pagans get along a lot better. You know what I mean? Maybe the church is weak in Poland. That did happen for a period of time. You know what I mean? You can set the time you want. So if you wanted to set the time to when Poland was actually mostly pagan, do that. If you know you're the kind of person that don't want to play Christian for some reason, because everybody knows Christians are OP. If you want to play a game where you create like a bunch of Kiev and Rus badasses and then decide to travel south and cross the Black Sea into the Eastern Roman Empire and get jobs as Varangians and spend all your time fighting various plains tribes, you know, like Pechenegs or Pinachegs and Avar and stuff like that, do it. You know, that's the thing with games that are set in reality is some people have a very hard time understanding that even if the game is set in 10th century Poland, assuming you set it in 10th century Poland, right? It's a game. And you're not going to be graded on how you run this game by your history teacher. You can run this game however you want. And that is my suggestion to the GM. Let the players guide where the game goes. And as players, embrace the setting. Realize that if you were born poor, then, your status is what it is. And, maybe nobles will talk to you a certain way. And instead of trying to buck up and act like, a modern person would, actually try role playing, the way a person in that culture would. So again, I go back full circle. I'm going to end it after I say this. There is probably no better OSR on the market for people who want full-on immersive role play than the Baptism of Fire, Last Vikings, etc. set. Probably, I don't think any exists. Now, OSE is better formatted, we can all agree. And Dragon Slayer's cool because it's got that cool nostalgia thing going on. And of course, we've got the classics, AD&D, right? So those are badass. No one's going to argue that point. But when you really sit down and look at the games, as I have, and I'm someone with 40 plus years of role playing, you realize that some games are made for role playing and some games are made for ROLL playing. And whichever one you prefer, that is just fine. That's your gig. You do you. But Baptism of Fire is for role playing. You're role playing your character, whether you're the forester that lives all alone in the woods, but has a kind of good relationship with some of the supernatural creatures out there, or you're the fighter that serves a noble lord, or you're a noble lord. Any of this is possible. And if you embrace it and you run with it, I think you'll love it. So I'm going to end it there. And peace and love to all. And God bless.